Good afternoon. Thanks for coming back. I know things have been particularly difficult over the last couple of weeks, and it really doesn't seem to be getting any better. We've heard a lot from the other campaigns over that time period. What I haven't heard, and what I assume you haven't heard, is a plan to make anything better. But as with my last announcement, I'm hoping that right here, we can start making the plans and planting the seeds for a better tomorrow. I'm here to talk to you today about the next of my 10 actions in the first 100 days of my administration. The purpose of my HEROES Act is to address inequality when it comes to part of our workforce. The next of the 10 actions will address inequality in another part of our society. Our country has come to a crossroads. It was a seemingly inauspicious time, yet it almost could not have happened at any other time. In Satire 10, the Roman poet Juvenal said, "Already long ago, from when we sold our vote to no man, the people have abdicated our duties. For the people who once upon a time handed out military command, high civil office, legions, everything, now restrains itself and anxiously hopes for just two things: bread and circuses." In this satire, Juvenal was identifying a problem with the Roman populace. They no longer cared about political involvement. In the 2nd century AD, politicians passed laws to keep the votes of their poorer citizens. They did this by providing free grain and free entertainment. Free grain for bread, and the circuses for entertainment. In America, the cost was much lower. We didn't require bread. We bought it ourselves when we could afford it. And the circuses, they broadcast those into our living room. But if we wanted to go see them live, we paid for that too. We were so easily distracted. But then, all of that distraction was taken away. We were locked in our homes, watching the world seemingly fall apart, and all of those blinders fell right off. And for some of you, you saw the real world for the first time. For some of us, we knew that this dirty, dark part of the country existed. Whether it was Michael Brown or Tamir Rice or Freddie Gray or the countless names and hashtags that came before them, we knew that a cancer was growing just beneath the surface, unseen by so many. For those of us who woke to that reality in recent years, we too were blind to the fact that the world has been this way for a long time. It's a world that many Americans have lived in their entire lives, and their parents lived in, and their grandparents lived in. But now, all eyes turn to Minneapolis, Minnesota. America's dirty little secret was revealed for all to see. Now, hopefully, we all know. Not everyone feels safe around police. Not everyone feels like they're being protected and served. That's the difference. But the truth is, the disparity in treatment does not begin and end with the police departments out on the street. It continues in every stage of our judicial system, including the penalty phase, whether it's commitment or parole or probation. This is the newest phase of America's great sin. For 246 years, the Middle Passage brought men, women, and children in bondage to American shores. But the end of slavery didn't mean the end of disparity for black and brown people. It just changed it. General Sherman burned through Georgia, but not even he could burn through the hearts of the people that lived there. Chattel slavery gave way to Jim Crow, and another 100 years passed, with separate but equal being the siren song of unequal treatment of people based on race. In the 1960s, the courts ended the farce that was separate but equal, but true equality was never on the agenda. It was a short respite, as the majority of America tried to deal with the demons of our cumulative past, just as their grandparents had done during the Civil War. But those better angels soon subsided, and the 1970s gave way to the 1980s. Jim Crow had meant a more subtle form of disparity. Gone were the irons and chains of chattel slavery, but with the 1980s and the rise of Ronald Reagan, those returned. You see, slavery was never really outlawed. It was just changed. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for crime whereof the party shall having been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States. That is the 13th Amendment that allegedly ended slavery. Today, the country's incarcerated population of 2.3 million people is disproportionately people of color. It's 38% in our prison population versus 13% in the overall population. The war on drugs started by Ronald Reagan was a key driver in the swelling prison populations disproportionately affecting brown and black communities. African American and white youth use drugs at about the same rate. And yet, African Americans are 6 times more likely to wind up in prison. Tougher sentencing compounded racial imbalances in prison populations. In California, the 1994 three strikes law doubled the time that a defendant with a prior conviction for a serious felony would serve on their second offense. For those with 2 or more prior strikes, the law mandated a prison term of 25 years to life. The result of policies such as these created a surge in the number of African Americans in prison. By 1993, the incarceration rate of blacks was 7 times that of whites. And that cancer has grown and grown through the 1990s and the aughts and even up to today. Now, it is left to us to blot out this spot that has for so long stained our republic. That brings us to the EAJ Act, the Equal Access to Justice Act, addressing the problem from the streets up. First, I will invoke the Justice Department to investigate any and all alleged abuses of civil rights by local law enforcement agents. Where local or state prosecutors fail to act, we will not, and we will hold these agents accountable. Perhaps most notably, I will establish a blue ribbon Presidential Council on Policing. It will be their task to examine the varying policies and procedures used by departments around the country and establish a bright line set of rules and a set of regulations which clearly demarcate a better national policy on policing. They will make recommendations on changes in policy, especially the establishment of non-armed, non-police intercessors who can be available for calls to which the police should not have been summoned in the first place. I will ask for their recommendations no less than 1 year after the establishment of the council, though their work may continue long into the future. I expect that their recommendations may include a level of professionalism that is missing at the local level of police. And they will cite the inevitable conflict of interest from small town policing. This is a problem where favoritism and other issues run rampant in small towns and small localities around our country. I am open to and will consider the establishment of a national police force. At the direction of the Justice Department, this force can and will intercede in places where local law enforcement agencies, anywhere, are deemed to be unsalvageable. They will act to bring true equality and real justice to the citizens of those towns, counties, and cities. They will offer a temporary and transitional force for localities to rely on to rebuild their local departments. Second, I will move Congress to take a few very important actions. We will pass national legislation rolling back the protections of state-level police officers' bills of rights. The fact is, those who uphold the law, those entrusted with that sacred duty, should be held to a higher standard, not a lesser one. They are not above the law. Further, we will create a national police database, which will require any law enforcement officer to register. Moreover, any complaint made against any officer will be required to be registered with the database. It will include the determination of the internal investigation of that department, no matter what that determination is. These records will be reviewed regularly by the Justice Department to ensure that local law enforcement agencies are properly disciplining their rank and file. This database will be made available to all law enforcement agencies, and it will be a requirement to search this database before hiring an officer. No longer can willful blindness be allowed in the hiring of those with the public trust. While it may not be in our power to enact federally, I will encourage state and local officials to begin to require that all of their officers be insured against lawsuits for incidents that occur while in the line of duty. We will make this database available to those insurance companies so that they may know who it is they are insuring. Then, we will pass federal legislation specifically enacting the protections of Brady v. Maryland as outlined by the Supreme Court of the United States, and making those applicable to all of the states universally via the 14th Amendment. As a corollary to this, we will enact a federal punishment for knowingly or negligently violating the new law that I just mentioned. This means that any local, state, or federal prosecutor who withholds evidence will be subject to a federal indictment, trial, and incarceration for that offense. Afterward, we will address the issue of qualified immunity and its protections for officers and the prosecutors on the federal level. Although the states may decide to implement these federal levels or not, all decisions will be subject to a review by the Justice Department and a possible federal indictment, without the protections of any qualified immunity from the state level. Next, at the federal level, as an example for the states, we will establish budgets for the public defender's offices in each district where they serve that match the prosecuting agency's budgets. We will separate the operating budgets for the courts and the prosecutors. We will separate the offices of the courts and the prosecutors. And as much as possible, we will separate the goals of the courts and the prosecutors. Finally, we must address the dynamic nature of our system of laws. As I speak to you today, there are thousands of men and women behind bars serving sentences for crimes that are no longer crimes. Most specifically, and most glaringly, the personal possession of cannabis. On that topic, as an aside, we must order the DEA to move cannabis from Schedule 1 list of narcotics to Schedule 4, where it belongs. I will make it a priority to push forward a policy of ex post facto pardoning for any and all crimes which are later removed from the books. We will return voting rights in at minimum federal elections to those pardoned under this action, and further, all those who have been released from their incarceration periods, having served their times, will have the vote returned. But we must stop the inherent belief that just because we have always done a thing a certain way, that we should continue to always do it that way. English jurist William Blackstone said in the 1760s, "It is better that 10 guilty persons escape than one innocent suffer." Blackstone and men like him established our system of justice, and it is time that we return to those principles. They have been lost in a system where success is tied to conviction rather than justice. We have all seen the stories, too many stories, of innocent men and women set free months or years or even decades after they began their incarceration for a crime they did not commit. Justice should always be our aim, not conviction. In the interest of justice, I will establish new courts with new judges to preside over them to hasten the decision-making process for those who seek redress of their grievances. No man should sit behind bars for months or years just for a hearing on his innocence. Additionally, we will provide funds to states and localities to do the same. We need to make the courts run well again. And we need to give them the right goals. Justice. Always justice. In that spirit, I will ask Congress to expand the protections of habeas corpus, to give those facing the desperate situation of having no appeals left and facing the inevitability of shouting their innocence into the void, a place to seek redress of those grievances. Our system has failed so many, lost so many. It will not be easy. It will not be quick. And it will be costly, but it will also be worth it. Frankly, that's the overarching message of this entire program. For decades, we have spent trillions of dollars nation building around the globe, bringing democracy and bringing justice to oppressed people from Saigon to Baghdad. It is time we make the investment of nation building right here at home. It is time that we spend the time and the effort and the money to assure justice for oppressed people on our own shores and in our own cities. British politician William Ewart Gladstone infamously said, "Justice delayed is justice denied." There is no way to make up for the injustice that has metastasized deep within our system. But we can, like skillful surgeons, cut out the cancer and leave the healthy cells to thrive. That is what we seek to do with the Equal Access to Justice Act. You can find more about this and my entire agenda of programs at robcheekforpresident.com and cheekforamerica.com. Thank you for coming today.